Of all the unknowns people look for a way to reveal, one of the most vexing is the future. As I've said, I don't put much stock in any device or technique that claims to tell the future. The universe, constantly being transformed by acts of free will, is just too random for incarnate beings like us to anticipate very specifically. That's not to say I think the future is entirely unknowable. However, to know the future is something I believe requires a frame of reference outside of the linear time experienced by human beings. The mind of God, existing in some unknown continuum beyond our space-time, can doubtless look at past, present, and future as if they were just so many positions along a stream. But that divine perspective is not found in the terrain of mortal experience. While I doubt the ability of human beings to see into the future, devices used for divination can provide a system of reflection and insight to inform the choices we make that shape our lives. They can draw attention to influences and trends that help form the momentum of the future, if not precisely spell it out in detail. The tarot is a system of divination people use for questions they believe reason alone either cannot or will not answer. As with astrology, my spiritual beliefs have evolved over time to be more open to systems like the tarot, not because I believe they can forecast the future, but rather because I see the tarot as a unique device with a potential for opening a channel of communication by which our conscious minds can receive messages from deeper levels of consciousness not normally accessible to us. What I want to share in this two-part video are my thoughts about how the tarot can function as a kind of metaphysical messaging system that can reveal useful insights in response to our questions. For a number of years, I've enjoyed creating images that were generated by computer using various bits of software like those used to make computer animated movies. At one point, I got the notion that this kind of still art would catch on commercially, and I might be asked to do commissioned work. I typically produce my own original images through experimentation, often with no particular end in mind when I begin them. Having to aim for a specific concept that came from someone else posed a creative challenge. To find out how difficult a challenge it would be, I looked around for existing images to give me something to work toward. I'd been vaguely aware of the tarot, and so picked half a dozen cards from which to make my own versions of their pictures. I never planned on creating a deck. I showed the finished work to a graphic designer I knew. He thought what I had done was rather good, and suggested that I should complete an entire deck. So I began to look at the styles of different decks and designed a deck of my own based on the classic Rider-Waite images. That project inspired me to learn more about the symbolism of each card over the 3 years it took to complete my deck. As a deck of cards, the tarot is commonly believed to have been derived from various types of playing cards introduced to Europe from India during the 13th or from Egypt under the Mamluk Sultanate during the 14th centuries. Various French, German, Italian, and English decks of cards developed during this period. The tarot itself is believed to have come from Italy around the middle 15th century, containing the traditional Latin suits of swords, cups, coins, and staves. A later French variation of the tarot changed the suits to the widely known set of spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. The English subsequently simplified the deck by removing the trump cards and eventually produced the deck of 52 playing cards commonly found at a blackjack table or poker night at home. There are stories told about the origin of the allegorical trump cards, ranging from the work of Gnostics dating back to early Christianity, to Egyptian priests, to the Kabbalah mystic tradition within Judaism. However, these stories are hotly disputed by gaming purists who insist the tarot is nothing more than a game. In fact, in the 18th century, a schism of sorts resulted in two very different approaches to the tarot. A former Swiss Protestant minister turned occultist and pioneer of linguistics suggested the allegorical aspect of the trump cards gave them use as an arcane way of expressing esoteric knowledge. From that point, so-called reading tarots became increasingly allegorical and reinvented for divination, while playing tarots that resemble common playing cards continued to be used for games. In the early 20th century, Christian mystic Arthur Edward Waite produced his own take on the allegorical structure of the cards, extending a unique symbolism to each of the pip cards in the 4 suits. His contribution eventually became the widely known Rider-Waite Tarot, from which many modern decks have been derived. My own deck is a personal interpretation on the images in the Rider-Waite deck. While there are gaming tarot enthusiasts to this day who aggressively challenge any discussion of the deck as an instrument of divination, the fact remains that for over 2 centuries, millions of people have successfully used the tarot for shedding light on their questions. The word divination itself is often presumed to mean fortune-telling, when the word also means using supernatural methods to reveal hidden knowledge or obtain insight. The tarot is a deck of cards. The reason for its creation is incidental to the fact that as a deck of cards it can be used for many things. You can play games, build card houses, perform magic tricks, level an uneven coffee table, try to tell your future, or use their images as a way to access deeper levels of consciousness for revelation and understanding. This last use is the sole focus of my interest in the tarot. The tarot consists of 78 cards organized into 2 distinct types. There is a collection of 56 cards organized into 4 suits called the Minor Arcana. Each suit contains 14 cards. There are pip cards ace through 10, as well as 4 face cards named the Page, the Knight, the Queen, and the King. There's some variation in the names given to the suits. In my own deck, the 4 suits are called Cups, Coins, sometimes called Pentacles, Swords, and Staves, sometimes called Wands. Each suit has an overarching metaphysical and psychological significance that unites the cards of that suit. Unlike a conventional deck of playing cards, each card within a tarot suit has a unique image and associated meaning. There is a second collection of 22 cards called the Major Arcana, or sometimes called the Trumps. The cards of the Major Arcana have very distinct characters or situations like the Magician, the Empress, the Tower, Death, the Sun, Justice, and so on. Each card in the Major Arcana is numbered as well as named. The order of this numbering, as well as the content of each card in that order, are believed to represent the evolutionary path of human spiritual development from the novice to the enlightened master. The cards of the Major Arcana are said to give special significance when they surface in a reading. A key to understanding the tarot comes from the work of the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who lived from 1875 to 1961. Jung was not only fascinated with the workings of the human psyche, he was also very curious about metaphysics and mysticism. Several of Jung's ideas have a central role to play in explaining the tarot. In this first part of the video, I want to talk about one of those ideas. Jung said, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." One of the ways Jung suggested we might understand those contents was through his notion of archetypes in human psychology. An archetype is a general and idealized form of a personality or behavior. It was Jung who proposed that archetypes were universal forms that convey experiences and emotions, producing recognizable and common patterns of behavior that then result in understandable and likely outcomes. While the questions we ask of the tarot have the form of human language, the answers given in reply are expressed in the language of archetypes. Because of this, the answers require interpretation to translate their meanings into the contexts of our personal lives and our specific inquiry. But archetypes also make it possible for a system of 78 cards to speak to a wide range of situations. In a typical reading, a seeker comes with a question they want answered or about which they wish to receive advice. Some people read their own cards if they feel able, while others go to an experienced and gifted reader who interprets the cards on their behalf. People who lack much experience reading the cards, like me, rely heavily on books to interpret the meaning of a reading. More experienced readers learn to tap into their intuition and allow the cards to invoke their meaning in the moment, even when the message runs counter to a traditional interpretation. Like any use of intuition, practice with the cards is said to improve the detail and accuracy of a reader's insight. The ritual of a reading varies, but it is not uncommon for one card to be removed from the deck in advance to symbolically represent the seeker. This card, called the significator, is meaningful to the seeker generally, or in the context of their question. The seeker then shuffles the deck while holding their question in mind. This element of a reading seems particularly relevant in how the deck might function, which is something I'll elaborate on in part 2 of this video. Then a number of cards from the deck are dealt face down into any of several common layouts. These layouts, called spreads, place the cards in a sequence with each position commenting on a particular dimension or facet of the question asked. One of the most common tarot spreads, called the Celtic Cross, deals out 10 cards with the first 6 cards laid out in a cross, with the final 4 cards in a column off to the right. But there are other spreads that employ different numbers of cards in different patterns. The cards are turned over and revealed in order, one at a time. Each card is read in terms of the symbolism of the specific card as found in the context of its placement in the spread. Finally, after all the cards are revealed, the answer to the question is interpreted in light of both the individual cards and the cumulative pattern of the entire spread. In my mind, the tarot is a kind of metaphysical technology, like a spiritual instant message system of sorts. It employs a fairly standardized device and one of several typical methods. Thinking of the tarot as technology not only makes it more approachable in my view, it also suggests there are underlying principles that allow the deck to operate. In fact, one of the reasons I find the tarot fascinating is the manner in which it appears to bring together functions of human psychology, physical reality, and spiritual gifts to convey meaning. To understand this point of view, a few observations about readings are worth mentioning. The physical contact between a seeker who consults the tarot with the deck as it is shuffled, while at the same time focusing mentally on their question, is important. Second, it is also significant that the cards are dealt into their spreads face down and only turned up when it is time to read the unique occurrence of meaning revealed by the entire spread. What do I mean by a unique occurrence of meaning? Mathematically, there are a known number of possible combinations of cards that can appear in a given reading. The exact number is determined by the number of cards shuffled in the deck, as well as how many cards are drawn for the reading. In a 10-card Celtic Cross spread, with one card removed in advance to represent the seeker, there are approximately 4 billion sequences into which the cards seen in a reading can be arranged. To see just how unique a given reading is, if you assume tarot reading is about 230 years old, and there has been one reading done on average every second in that time, the total number of sequences that have appeared so far amounts to almost 2/10,000,000ths of 1% of the total possibilities. And that number doesn't take into account combinations in which cards appearing upside down when revealed expose a different interpretation. You are likely the first, and perhaps only person, to see the sequence of cards that appear in your reading. I believe the tarot operates because it takes advantage of effects that arise from the structure of human consciousness and the quantum nature of our physical reality. To explain this in greater detail, first we must examine some additional ideas that come to us from Carl Jung. And then we need to explore one of the most famous thought experiments of quantum mechanics, conceived by one of the pioneers of quantum theory, Erwin Schrödinger. In part 2 of this video, I'll elaborate on these ideas from Jung and Schrödinger, as well as how they might work together to enable the tarot to do something rather extraordinary, send us cryptic but potentially useful information from beyond the curtain, beyond which our conscious minds cannot normally see.